Alright, I got another cool deck. This one is less meta relevant, but to me more interesting and very fun if you can kind of make the things start working, I believe. So I got the kind of idea for it at locals, or not locals, sorry, pre-release for this set, because one of the pre-release decks kind of centered around Accelgor. It centered around Accelgor and Lily's Pokemon, and I can actually totally see the reason for that, and I'm going to actually highlight that a little bit later in the video, but I will just kind of show you some of the stuff in the deck to start out. Pecharunt, and I mean, we should probably highlight Neutralization Zone as well. I've got a redeemable ticket in this one. Who knows if it'll actually be good. So these are generally the Pokemon. We've got 4/4 Accelgor and Shelmet, 2 Mimikyu, 2 Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, 1 Pecharunt, Latias EX, Monkey Dory, and Pheasantipity EX. Whole lot to talk about here. Let's start out with the Accelgor's attack. So Accelgor has an attack called Poisonous Ploy. It does 70 damage, it costs 2 energy, one of them has to be grass. And your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. Switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. Very cool, very interesting. Similar to Flygon EX, but it also adds on effects, and it's not an EX, which, you know, inherently makes it more difficult for your opponent to win when they're playing into a non-EX deck. Although, you know, there are a couple of EXs in here that they might be able to snipe. So, other stuff that we got. Mimikyu. You can start with this in your active spot, and you can switch into it every time that you use your Accelgor if your opponent is playing EXs as their main attackers. And if they don't have any other options for their main attacker aside from EXs, this is, you know, not a game winner because they can obviously boss up other stuff, but very, very solid to just have a Mimikyu, you know, constantly in your active. So you use Poisonous Ploy, you swap into Mimikyu, they can't attack Mimikyu. You do that again and again and again, and eventually they're poisoned, confused, and, you know, whatever else, and very angry. If their main attacker is a Pokemon that has an ability, you can swap into Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. In a lot of cases, I wouldn't recommend even putting this on your bench unless you're sure that their main attacker is a Pokemon with an ability and they, you know, can't set up other stuff that doesn't have abilities to attack, because ultimately it's a two-prizer and you don't want to give your opponent the ability to kind of speed the game up in that way. Latias EX allows you to switch back into Accelgor when other stuff is in the active. We run, not switch card, what the heck is the thing called? Rescue board. We run like 2 or 3 of rescue board to try and also be able to, you know, if you don't have your Latias, still get your Pokemon back out of the active spot, as well as some Jet Energies to try and get your Accelgors into the active. Alternatively, we're running 2 switch cards, not switch cards, still rescue board. So you can pop a rescue board directly onto one of your Mimikyus, and then just always have that one go into the active, you know, whatever. Monkey Dory, if you have the time to set up your Monkey Dory, it's advisable, because sometimes your opponents will, you know, kind of chip down your Mimikyu with various other stuff. And if they go for a strategy like that, you can just put a Dark Energy on your Monkey Dory and throw that right back at them. You know, kind of get rid of that kind of scheming. Pheasantipity's and everything. We all know what it does. Pecharunt is also interesting. In some cases, you could do Poisonous Ploy for 70, switch into Pecharunt, and now instead of doing an extra 10 damage, the poison will now do 5 damage, or 5 more damage counters, which, is it 5 more? Yeah, 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon. So it does 60 total poison damage then, which, sorry, it's very late. 130 damage you know, that can pop a lot of stuff. If you're on your second time using Poisonous Ploy on something, switching to this will often probably kill whatever you're hitting. Very useful if you have Neutralization Zone in play, which, once again, you can't really read it all that well on here, but it says, prevent all damage done to Pokemon that don't have a rule box, both yours and your opponent's, by attacks from Pokemon that EX and V, you know, Pokemon that have rule boxes, basically. And then also, it can't be put back into your hand by any effects if it goes into the graveyard or the discard pile. So, we've talked about basically all the Pokemon in the deck. Yeah, it's just a very interesting, like, kind of hit and run deck. When I played it at pre-release, I had a lot of fun. And then, you know, obviously I've updated the deck list to kind of have more stuff in it. Practice Studio is interesting as a secondary, whatever it is, Stadium. Just makes you do 10 more damage with Stage 1 Pokemon when they attack. So it's nothing insane, but the extra 10 damage can make a difference sometimes. TM Devo, if your opponent goes for a strategy where after they get hit, they swap out to avoid the Confuse coin flip, and they do that a couple times, you can TM Devo to just pop like 3 or 4 things at once if they just got 70 damage on a lot of things. Situational against basic decks, it's going to do nothing, but in some cases it'll do a whole bunch. Super Rod, in case you lose a bunch of your energy. Counter Gain can be useful if you're behind, because it just makes your attacks cost 1 less. So you can only attach 1 grass energy and attack with your Accelgor. I think it's just a 1 of Professor's Research. And by the way, this is a new Professor's Research art. I really like it. It's very nice. 1 of Iono, maybe more than 1 of Iono. Arvin, Counter Catcher. Once again, if you're behind, you can kind of choose what you're hitting. Jet Energy, if one of your Pokemon gets stuck in the active and you don't have any other ways, 1 switch. TM Evo. Similarly, like, situationally useful. If you have, like, 2 Shelmets on your bench and you've got a Mimikyu in the active, you could TM Evo to get them both into Accelgors. Crispin here as well to just stack energy. So yeah, there's nothing insane going on here. There also isn't like a strong draw engine, so you're gonna find yourself stalling a lot of the time, if we're being honest. And it's probably the weakest part of this deck. But the problem with the deck, if there is one, I think there is one, like it's not like a tier 1 deck, it's more of a rogue thing, is you really don't want to have stuff on your bench that's not absolutely necessary, because you don't want to give your opponent any chances to potentially take additional prizes. So what that means kind of logistically is that any draw engine Pokemon are kind of a liability. Now obviously you've seen in like Snorlax decks in the past, they ran Rotom V for draw, and you kind of just take the hit if that thing gets taken out. So, if anything, I could see this deck running the Dunsparce draw engine to make it kind of go faster, because the Dunsparces, so long as they don't get like taken out by your opponent in 1 turn, can just be shuffled back into your deck to draw 3, and the Dunsparces have free retreat, so doubly useful there, honestly. I think that might be the best strategy if you're trying to make this deck really shine. Oh, and one other thing. I talked about this at the beginning, and then I almost forgot about it. An interesting strategy to me, and it was part of the pre-release, like this was the whole idea with the pre-release deck, or the build and battle, I suppose. My thought would be running some Lily's Pokemon, only basic ones, that potentially have a good ability, or maybe not even. But instead of switching constantly into stuff like Mimikyu, which, you know, there are ways around it and there are ways to take it out, putting down stuff like Lily's Ribombee or maybe Lily's Comfey, although I like Lily's Ribombee because it doesn't have a retreat cost. Obviously it's a stage 1 though, so you have to get up to it. But something like this, and just attaching Lily's Pearls to them, now you've got something that you can switch into that gives up no prizes. Which I don't know, it's just a very, very interesting strategy to me, right? As opposed to, you know, oh, I've got a wall up in front of you. It's like, oh, I've got something that you can hit and it's just gonna give you nothing. Like, it just doesn't even matter. So I could see that being somewhat legitimately useful if you were to try and like really go with this strategy. There's a couple things that I'd like to play around with. Obviously, like, you know, I just built the deck today because I just got the cards today, but I'm very interested to see if it's actually like really usable or not. Like I said, I don't think that it's ever going to be tier 1, but I do think that it's very fun and very interesting. And so I'm going to be playing it a little bit. Probably more at casuals than, you know, locals or regionals or anything like that. But you never know. If I have really strong play with it at casuals, then maybe I'll try it. But anyways, that's it for this one. Kind of a shorter overview video, but that's not a bad thing. If you have any questions about the deck, if you have any suggestions, anything, leave a comment. I'd love to hear it. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you know you really liked it, subscribe. I'm doing these as much as I can now. And yeah, I appreciate it. Have a good one.